Hi everyone, today we're going to be building a food costing spreadsheet. This spreadsheet will enable restaurants to create menu items and add ingredients and labor information to make costing decisions. The spreadsheet has a single interface sheet and some additional sheets which act as databases. I've added some color and formatting to the interface sheet to make it look more like an application. The database sheets can be hidden or even put into a different spreadsheet. So users cannot directly edit them. All the editing of the databases will happen through this interface. And how it works is there's a drop-down menu here, and different menu items can be selected. All of this dynamically updates. And over here, there are some buttons which access AppScript. There's the new menu item button, and I will just add a new menu item. Fill out all these fields, and then I'll paste in an image link. And when I click it, it updates. All the ingredients information is added, but I have to add ingredients. So let's say I want to add 0.3 pounds of ground beef with a yield of 0.95. And when I click that, it updates. If I want to update the selling price, I click on this and I can edit all the menu fields here. So let's say I want to increase the price to $13. I can do that. It updates all dynamically. So that's the functionality. There are other things we could add, like right now this doesn't have any deleting of ingredients, and there's no adding of the raw ingredients. May want to do that through a separate sheet. Also the costing, this is just a budgeted cost. This may want to be fed in through a separate inventory system so you can get actual weighted average cost, or FIFO or LIFO, however you want to do it. So that's the basic overview. It's these three databases, and then I have a joined database which combines some of the fields from the menu items, ingredients, and the ingredients. I did this just so this query here would be easier. Could have done it without that separate sheet, just doing separate formulas here, but just decided to create that join sheet. So let's get started building this. I will bring over a blank spreadsheet so we can start building the project. The menu item detail sheet is blank. I've pasted in the database sheets and the settings, labor cost per hour. And I also have some named ranges in here just to make it easy to reference cells and ranges. And let's get started creating the combined database. I'll start with a array formula and array formula, menu item, ingredients. There we go, and I'll get all the columns in the menu item ingredients tab, and then I want to pull in ingredient name, ingredient cost, and net ingredient cost. And so for this one, I'll do another array formula and a VLOOKUP of that column in the ingredient data, and the ingredient data will be 2. Got an extra bracket here. So I want to get rid of that, the errors below, so I will just add a, so that should clean up the bottom. And then this one, I'll do the same. And then I think we want to go 4 for the cost. Let's format it. And this is a calculation based on the yield. So G2 divided by E2 E, and if it's not an error, we'll just, so that's the net ingredient cost. So this is just a joining table to make it easy to reference in the main menu item detail. So now I'm going to get into the script. Before I get into the script, I'm just going to open another version of this. So I can open the script from this sheet, and when I refresh the other sheet, it doesn't close the script. I'll get rid of this one to the other side. So on this, I'm going to start on the script. I want to just get started by creating what's called a globals. And these are just a bunch of values that I'm going to be reusing over and over again in the script. I'll start with the sheets. So the menu item detail sheet, that will be this sheet. So basically just each of these sheets, I want to have easy access to them in the script. So get active spreadsheet, get sheet by name, and I'm going to do this for all the sheets. I don't need to do it for the combined sheet, but I'll do it for the menu items. Called menu items. And menu item ingredients. And the ingredient sheet. And let's get the setting sheet. Okay, so there are the globals. And the first thing I want to do is create a gradient on the interface sheet. If you remember, I had a blue background that was a gradient, and I will use a script to create that. I'll start with, I have this site. I just found a site to give me a gradient palette. I started with a start and end color. So I click export, and what's going to give me is an array of hex values. I'll copy that and move this over. And what I'm going to do is paste in, there's the array, and I'm going to create a function. Gradient page. I'm only going to use this function once, and the sheet I will use menu item detail sheet, and paste in this array. So I've got the gradient array there, and I'll just use a for loop. And the for loop's going to scroll through there, get the range, and I will just say the row will be I plus 1. It'll be the first column. It'll just be one row, and I'll say 26 columns over that we're going to set. And then we will do range set background, and I will concatenate this gradient array sorry, and we want to set the font color as well. We'll do it as white. I'm going to detach this so we can see it. So this is the sheet where we're going to be placing the gradient, and we can just run it straight off here. Looks okay. Hopefully it runs okay. I'll have to give the permissions to the script. This is the first time running a script. Okay, so there's the gradient. Some of these cells, some of the rows will become wider, so I'll push it down out of the screen. So there is the gradient done. Okay, let's get started on the interface page. The first part of the interface page is, if you remember, the way we select the menu items is in this cell. So what I'm going to do first is do a data validation, and the formula is coming from menu item names, and we want to reject anything that doesn't exist. So that's working, and let's get it a little larger here. Okay, so there is the selector. And so below that, we will have the following: menu SKU, ingredient cost per recipe, labor hours per recipe, labor cost per hour, cost per recipe, cost per serving, target margin, selling price, ideal selling price, and then this is where we will have the ingredients, the dynamic ingredients grid. And how we want to do this is with a query. And the query will look at menu, item, ingredients combined. A to H. And we will, I believe it's going to be A to H. Yep, that's what it is. And so when we're looking at this, we're going to do a select. And the order we want the name first, so we'll go F. And then we'll have the SKU. So we'll go B, the ingredient SKU, not the menu SKU. And then we'll have the quantity. And then the unit. And then we will have the cost, but we want the cost per unit. So let's go G times C. And then we will have the yield. And then we'll show the net ingredient cost. The net ingredient cost will be H times C. And we want this dynamic, so it's where A equals, and we will dynamically put that in there. And then we want to change the labels of the two multiplication G times C and H times C. And then close this out. Hopefully it works. It doesn't. Let's take a look where we're wrong here. Select F, B, C, D, G times C. It's because we don't have this value in here. There we go. So we need this to be, we need this SKU value to be working. So we will get that working now. First, I just want to so the SKU we want to get the SKU from this. So we want to get the it's kind of like a reverse V lookup. So to do it's actually an offset V lookup. So to do an offset V lookup, what I want to do is use an index, menu, items, and menu items A2 to B. So we're just using these first two columns. We're not using the whole range, but just the first two. Menu items A2 to A, and match A1, that's the name, menu items B, okay, so now that is reading that. Just want to get these formatted properly. And also I would like to get all of these set to a larger font. So now it's starting to look a little bit better. And just in case, I'm going to put a if and a in there in case to protect against an error. It'll just show a blank. Ingredient cost per recipe. What I will do for this is I just want to sum this, and we're going to assume that there won't be more ingredients than this. If you have recipes with longer ingredients lists, you can increase the size, but for this, we're just going to have it that long. So I'll do an if error and sum and if it's an error, I'll format it. And the labor hours per recipe, we will look it up from the menu items. So we'll do a VLOOKUP. I'll do it off the SKU. Could do false. So there's the labor hours. Let's make sure this is all changing. And the labor cost per hour is pretty basic. It's just going to be, I'll put an F error just in case, but it's just going to be labor cost. And labor cost per recipe will just be and servings per recipe, that's a basic VLOOKUP. VLOOKUP menu items and 1, 2, 3, 4. Cost per serving. Ingredients cost plus the labor cost divided by the serving. And let's put an if error in there. Target margin, another VLOOKUP based on the SKU. And it'll be menu items again. And I think that's going to be 3. Target margin. And the selling price. Or that's B2. Menu items. Forgot a comma. And then the ideal selling price will be B8, the cost of serving, divided by 1. Oh. So that's the cost of serving. 1 minus the target margin will give what, based on the actual costs and the margin, that's what we should be selling for. And I'm going to clear this out. That's wrong. I meant to add those here, those borders here. Okay, so that is all the dynamic content. And now we will create the dynamic image link. And I'm going to make it, in this one we just have URLs, but I want to make it in case someone wants to put a image inside a cell, store an image in a cell, which is possible. I won't show an example of this, but this formula should work for both situations. So if is URL, it'll check whether the cell is a URL, and we will use a VLOOKUP, and the VLOOKUP will be based on the name of the menu item. And we'll do that offset again, since we're not using the first column. We can't use a simple VLOOKUP. We could use the SKU in the next cell, but we'll just do it this way. And so VLOOKUP, and we're looking up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 from here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, because it's offset from here. So the offset, the VLOOKUP is from here. I'm just going to grab this. So if it's a URL, we're just going to do the basic VLOOKUP. Otherwise, we're going to put the image, or if this is a URL, we will use the image to get that link to use it. And otherwise, we don't use the image. We just use it like this. So if it's a URL, if this link is a URL, we use image. If not, we just pull it. And so in that case, if it's an image stored in the cell, it'll just pull it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to merge all these. Okay, so now that's all working. The image is dynamic, all the ingredients are dynamic, and all of these are dynamic. Okay, now we will insert the buttons that will trigger the app script. Start with a rounded rectangle. And give it a dark blue. New menu item. I don't know why it's cut off like that, but sometimes you have to move them around to when they're cut off like that. And now I will insert another drawing for the edit menu item details. I like to use the snap to grid. I don't know why it doesn't stay there. I don't know why I'm getting that error. Change that to white, format it to center. Edit menu item details. Move this out of the way because for some reason it cuts them off. And then we will have we're going to have these. This is going to be the ingredients grid. And I'll wrap that, and that will be a data validation to ingredient names. And I'll reject anything that's not ingredient name. And so now we want to have this quantity, but we don't want just quantity. We also want to have the unit of measure dynamic based on what the ingredient is. So let's choose an ingredient, spinach. And let's beef this up a little bit. So we want to have basically quantity bracket and then do a V lookup, and we're going to use the offset again because here the name is inside, so we're not doing a V lookup off the first column, we're doing a V lookup off the second. So we'll use that offset trick again. So we're doing it off H6, and we're doing offset, and we're doing ingredient data. we're not offsetting the row, we're offsetting the column 1. And we are going to and then we do we'll concatenate the other bracket. Let's just check if that's working. Seems to be working fine. And just in case, let's do a if error. Oh. It'll make it blank if there's an error there. And then this one is just simple yield. So these are the fields to edit the ingredients, and we still will need a button to edit those. So we will do, again, another button. I'll use snap to grid. And let's make it a little bit darker. Add, edit, menu, item, ingredients. And move this out of the way so it doesn't get cut off. Okay, so there are all the buttons and the ingredient grid. Now we will add the HTML sidebar. So to do that, we have to come over here and we create an HTML file. Call it new menu item. And then we'll also create a script called new menu item script. And for this HTML, what I'm going to bring in is some Bootstrap. And so here I'm on the Bootstrap site, and I just went to introduction, and I will download, or I'll copy the starter template. And we want to paste in the starter template, but we want to make sure we have this base target top in for the sidebar. So I'll paste it in, and then just be sure to get this on top. And now I'll delete this. And what we have to do now is create a function to launch that HTML. So new menu item, we'll call it. And HTML for sidebar. And that will be HTML service. Create template from file. And new menu item. HTML output, HTML for a sidebar. Evaluate and set the title to add menu item. And spreadsheet app get UI show sidebar HTML So let's just check if that works. We will attach the script to here. Assign script, new men. And we have to just get the permissions going for the HTML. Okay, so the template is working. Now we have to go in and change this. So what we're going to do is I will change the title, get rid of this header. Just put a form tag in there, and from the Bootstrap, I'm going to go to Forms, Input Group, and I'm just going to get this basic input group. Saving that. And we'll just take a look. I'll refresh it just in case. Okay, so that's the example, but those are not the fields that we want. So we're going to change these fields, but we're going to use a lot of these similar, these appends, prepends, and appends for the different symbols. So the first one we have here is @username. And we're going to change that to the first one will be the menu item name. The input type will be text, and the placeholder will be and I'll create an ID for it. So menu item name, and the second one will be the target margin. So that will be this one, and the type will be number, and the step will be 0.01, and the placeholder will be target margin, ID, the ID is target margin, and what I'll do is we want like the append similar to that 00. So I'll go down here. Oh, here we go. I'll take out this ARIA stuff. We don't need it for this. Okay, so the target margin's there, increments of 0.01. And so after the target margin, we want this to be labor or servings. So we got the target margin, and let's just copy it for the servings. And this one doesn't need a step because it's just servings. There's not going to be incremental servings. And this will be servings per recipe. And for let's see how that looks. Okay, we want the placeholder to change. But that should be fine. So after that, we need the labor hours. I'm going to copy this one again because the labor hours will be incremental by 0.01. And we will call this recipe labor hours. And at the end, in the placeholder, check how that looks. Waiting for it to come up. I don't know why it's taking so long. There might be an error in the HTML. There we go, recipe labor hours. And it's steps of 0.01. And so after recipe labor hours, we're going to do the price. So the price is going to be the same. And we'll call this sale price. Change the ID. But this one, we'll put $1 before that. And we'll see if that works. Yeah, looks good, but actually that does look good. Okay, so the sale price looks good. We don't want to have it like this because we do want the ability to put in cents. So that's the sales price, the sale price, and now we want the image, and the image is just going to be a text, kind of like this first one. So we will get rid of these, and we'll call this image URL, and the ID will be recipe image URL. And that's about it. That's just a text form, and then we need a button. So for the button, we'll just go button type submit class primary and ID equals save button submit. See how that looks. Menu item name, target margin, servings per recipe, recipe labor hours, sale price, image URL. So that looks good for the HTML. And now, I guess what we'll do next is we will put the script in for after to submit this and how it will get all these fields. So the JavaScript that we need JavaScript for when this button, the submit button, gets clicked. All these fields are picked up and then run through another script to be processed and added to the menu items. So first step in that is below all this bootstrap stuff, we will create another script. Script tag, and we'll start by creating a function. Call it after button clicked. And the first thing we need to do in this function is get those fields. So the menu item name will be document get by ID, and the ID is menu item name. Just double check that. So menu item name, target margin, servings per recipe, recipe labor hours, sale price, and recipe image URL. So I'll just make a copy of that. And so the next one is target margin, and the ID was target margin. And servings per recipe, servings per recipe, recipe labor hours, recipe labor hours, sale price, and I'll call this image URL. And it's recipe image URL. And if you remember, when we take this target margin, it's a whole number. It's not a percentage yet, but we want to convert it. So I'll create something called target margin converted, and that will be we're getting that value, which is going to be a string since it's pulled from the HTML, and just multiply it by 1 to turn it into a decimal, which will be how we'll store it in the database. And now what I want to create is these are going to be fed in as parameters into the script. So I'd rather do that in an object. Put it all in an object, so I'll just simplify it. Name, menu item value, menu item name dot value, target margin converted, servings, per recipe, hours, price, and image, so that's the parameters, and then how we're going to run the script will be Google script run, and we're going to have a with success handler because we want to clear the fields, and we haven't created this function yet, but we will. And then I guess we'll have a new script called add menu item, and it will feed in the parameter of those. So a couple things I need to do. First off, in here, I'm just going to put in this function add menu item data. It's just going to be blank for now, and we have to do the clear fields. So function clear fields, and we'll just have an E parameter in there, and I'll use these again in here. So all I'm going to do is that. So document, get the element and make it a blank. And just use copy and paste here. So there's the clear fields, and now we need a listener on that button. So document get element by ID, and I believe that's called save button. Save button. Add event listener. And the function is after button clicked. So let's just check. It's not going to do anything at this point, but we'll just check if it clears it and if it works. So I'll just put in a couple of things there, and it does seem to clear. It seems to be working. So before we move on to creating the script, I want to do the same thing for the edit menu item details button. So to do the edit menu item details HTML, we're going to copy the new menu item HTML. First, we'll create the script. Edit menu item, and then do the same. Edit menu script, and I'm just going to take this entire copy that, and I'll copy all this as well. Just change that and edit menu item. And the edit menu item will look, it'll basically be the same as the add menu item as far as how the fields, except we're not going to have the name as an option. So edit menu item, and I will take out the name, we'll change the button to update. We are getting rid of the name. Get rid of the name. Assign a script, edit menu item. So there it is. Now we'll just have to do the script, but so we're not having the option to change the name of the menu item, just things like the target margin, servings, labor, sales price, etc. So that's the basic HTML for both those. Let's just double check that this works. Clearing the fields. And that did not seem to work. So there might be a problem somewhere in here. Let's see if that fixed it. Just the name of the script. See if it clears it. It's refreshing it. Update menu item. That's why. Okay, that seems to be working now. Just had to change the name. So the next step will be to create all the scripts, the app script to make these run. So before we do that, I want to add some more of the globals. Now this gradient, we probably won't need it, but just in case, I'm just going to move it down here. So I have all the sheets. Just want to add some ranges. So fixed cells, we'll first get active menu item name, and so that's just, I just like to have these available so I don't always have to type out the full get range, etc. So that is the active name whenever we need that. And let's get the active menu SKU. I guess we'll say SKU range just to make clear this is a range, not the value. Active ingredient range. So the active ingredient range is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So it'd be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So the active ingredients range is going to be 6, 8. Active quantity range would be 7, 8. And the active yield range sorry, I'm going to make sure this is ingredient quantity range, and active ingredient yield range would be 8, 8. And to pull data from the sheet, I'm just going to have some functions because this data may change, so I don't want to have fixed ranges on them. So function get menu item range, and it will just be to return menu items sheet get range. And so this one will be start at the first column, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So we're going to get 7. So, but first we have to get menu items sheet get last row -1. That'll get the last row when this is run, and 8. So get menu item range, and let's get this one. Function get menu item ingredients range, return menu items ingredient sheet get range. And so again, start of the second row, we don't need the headers. First column, get last row -1, and for this one, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 5, and then a final one, function get ingredient range. Get ingredient range, return ingredient sheet get range. And for this one, we'll start at 2, second row, first column, get last row, and 1, 2, 3, 4. So there are those functions I'll use over and over again just to get those ranges, just so I don't have to retype that whole get range and the last get last row over and over again. So for the first script, we will do the add menu script. So we already have the function. Now we just have to put the code inside. And so const menu item data equals get menu item range get value. So this picks up all of this, the data from the menu items database. And first we're going to just do a check on the data fields. So let's say you could change this however you want, but let's say when we're creating a new item, we want all the fields to have values, or else we will not do anything. So what we'll do is we will So we have data, the name, margin. Remember, this is being fed in through this in the JavaScript out of the HTML. This is fed in through the add menu item data, so we're getting these elements and evaluating them. Servings, I believe it's called hours. Price and image. So to create a new item, we need all of those fields. You could change it. Maybe you don't always need the image. It's up to you to modify it. The other thing we want, we don't want doubles on the name. So I'm going to create a function check if value exists. And we'll create that later. And basically that will take the menu item data and we will be checking the menu item data, and we'll be checking the the menu item data, we'll check the name. So the name will be in the array, it'll be 1. SKU will be 0, name will be 1, and we'll be checking against the data.name. We haven't created this function yet, but it'll be a Boolean. So it will check if the value exists, and if it does not exist, it needs to not exist for us to basically carry out this to add the item. And to add the item is pretty simple. So we'll just do menu item sheet, append row. As long as all those criteria are met, we're just going to append to the row. And the SKU, obviously the data doesn't have a SKU. So the data, the SKU is just made based on what SKUs are already in the sheet. And so we're going to have another function that we need to create, and it will increment the SKU. So increment the SKU on menu item data, and just make sure we feed it the column, just so we can use this increment SKU on other sheets too. So it's flexible. And so we increment the SKU, and then the second field will be data.name. That will be the third column. Data.hours, data.price, data.image. So that will be net. So that will add the row at the bottom. Now what we have to do though is we have to create check if value exists and increment SKU. So what I'm going to do, rather than put those in there, I could put them in globals, or I can create what's called a utility script. This is just a place to store utility functions that will be used throughout. And so what did we have? We had check if value exists, looks like this, is going to look like this. So function check if value exists, and we'll just call this data array because it could be any kind of array, and the index, and not could be a name or something else. We'll just call this value, and so it's going to take those parameters, and it's going to be a Boolean. So first we'll just see what it finds. So data array dot filter, and in the data array, so we'll filter the data array and any row that meets the criteria. So if row, and this is the column, if the column in the row matches a value, then we will return row. So if after the filter, this found, if any values match the found, we'll have something in the array. So we want to just return found length greater than 0. So if the found length is 0, the value exists. Yeah, or else it's false. Okay, and then the other function we had is increment SKU. let's just take a look what we had in the parameters for increment skew. For increment skew, we had a data array and the skew index. Remember, we might want to reuse this, so we want it to be flexible. That's why we're doing it. And so let's do skew array is a blank array to start. And if the data array is the length is greater than 0, we want the skew array equal data array map and return row skew index. Let's just take a look here. Why? Oh. So if the data array length is greater than 0, then we're going to do this map skew array and so basically we're just getting an array of the skews only, and I'm just going to else return 1. That is if there's no values in to increment. Otherwise, we will have return math max. I'll do a spread skew array +1. And let's just test this. So function test skew and we want to we'll console log increment skew, and the data array will be get menu item range. Oh, it's a function get values, and the skew index is 0. So we'll test increment skew, see what it says. So it did increment it. It found 9 was the max, and it incremented by 1. And I will create just a place to put that test. I doubt we'll use it again, but you never know. Get that out of the way. So that seems to work. So let's test add menu item. And what we're going to do is we are going to create an object that we're going to feed into it. So we'll just get a name, margin, servings, hours, price, and for the image, I'm just going to copy one of these. Image, text, So that's a parameter. I have an error here. It's going to be a parameter we're going to use to test it. And then we will run add menu item. So test add menu item. We add the data and add menu item. Let's see if this works. Okay, it worked. I'm going to delete that. Just wanted to test that before moving on. And I'll take this test and I will move it into the tests. Again, we probably won't reuse these again, but just in case I want to store them there. So now let's test the add new menu item. So we pulled up a new just putting in some random numbers in here. And let's just copy. There we go, it works. The thing though, we want to make this active. So let's say I'll do another grapes. When we do this, we want to make it active. So when this carries out, if, and it's only if we meet the criteria, active menu item name set value data dot name. So we'll do another crepe 1000. Okay, there's an error there. So, oh no, it seemed to work. Just took some time, but everything cleared, that worked. There's no ingredients yet. We'll have to add those later. So that is all working well. I'm gonna get rid of these extra test crepes. So now let's create the edit menu item script. So we're going to come over here to the function update menu item, and so this is the same. It's taking in the data from the other HTML sheet, which is similar to the menu script. So I'm going to use similar parameters. The only difference is we're not giving the option to edit the name, and we're not checking if the value exists, because obviously it does exist. So that's the last parameter. And then instead of and, what we're checking for, we're doing an or. So we're doing an or because only one of these fields, if you remember, only one of these fields needs to be filled for it to update. But one needs to be filled, or else we're not going to do anything. So in this function, the first thing we need is the active SKU, because it is, when we're editing, we're just editing whatever is active in the interface sheet. So and let's we'll create a function for this. get active SKU. It's going to be pretty basic, just return and active menu SKU range, get value. So that function will get that. So we get the active SKU, and then we need the menu item data, because we're gonna need that to edit. So menu item data equals get menu item range, and get values. And so the first thing we are going to do is we will get the active row that we want to edit. So and we'll use a filter. And if row return row. So this will get the actual row that we want to edit. And so the updated row, I don't want to do the function in here because it'll be too much for one function. So I'll break it out into a second function. Update menu item row. And the parameters would be active row and the data from that's being fed in to update it. And when we do this filter, even though it's only one row, it's still going to be a 2D array. So let's make sure we're just getting the first item in that 2D array. There will only be one item, but we have to break it out. And then we need the index. We need the active row index. Maybe we could have got it up here with the filter because we could get the index there, but I'm going to do it separate. Menu item data, and let's use a map and row. And we will return so basically we are just getting a an array of all the SKUs, and we'll go index of active SKU. So that's going to just give us the index of the row that we want to edit. And then we're going to take menu item data and use that active row index change it to that updated row, and then get menu item range set values menu item data. So we're changing the element of the menu item data for that active row index, and then just setting the values in here. We're not adding any rows, it's the same amount of rows, so we can just use that same get menu item range. So now what we have to do is we have to create this function. And the update menu row function will look like this. You'll take in the active row, which will be an array, and it will take in the data which is already being fed in to that one. So let updated row equal active row. And now let's do a check on all the fields from the data. If data margin, and I'm going to do a check for undefined as well as data, as well as a blank field. And if that is, if those two are not true, so the margin is 0, 1, 2. So updated row 2 equals data dot margin. So that's for margin. We need to check servings, hours, price, and image. So and I'm just doing Command D to select multiples there. And hours. So margin, serving, hours. Margin, serving, hours. Price. Image. And we got to make sure we change these. So the servings 0, 1, 2, 3. The hours 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. And the price is 5. And the image is 6. So then we've changed the updated row. It's good to return. Misspelled return. Okay, so that should be good to go. Let's do a test on it. So function test update menu item. And we will, so let's say we got the crepes. Update menu item. And we're just going to have one field. And I've got another image over here I'll paste in. And let's run that test, see if it works. Test update menu item. And it updated it. So this has changed from the crepe picture to the cupcake picture. And the other fields should work as well. So now we'll work on the edit menu item ingredients script. And that one does not have a sidebar. It's just based on this. First, I'm going to switch that back to a crepe picture. Hopefully that works. So we're creating the script where we can enter, we can choose the ingredient and change either the quantity or the yield over here. So there's no HTML. And what we want, so we want to add a script here edit ingredient. Edit ingredient script, and we'll call the function update menu item ingredients. So what we want to do is we're going to be updating the ingredients of whatever item is active here. So we want to get that active SKU. And we want to differentiate between the active menu SKU and the active ingredient SKU. So get active SKU and we want to get the ingredient data. Get ingredient range, and we want to get the menu ingredient data. Get menu item ingredients range. That's a function. Get values. And we want to get the active ingredient name. So that is, we want to get this value, and then we want to get the active ingredient SKU. So we will need a function. I'll do it outside of this function. Get ingredient SKU from name. And the parameters would be so get ingredient SKU from name, and the parameters would be the active ingredient name and the ingredient data. So basically going to be scrolling through the data and getting the SKU. We'll do that one after. So that's the active ingredient SKU, and then we need to get the unit. So const active ingredient unit, and let's create another function for this unit, and we'll take it from the, we'll use the SKU to get it. And we'll just active ingredient SKU, and again the ingredient data, and then we need these two values. We need the quantity and the yield. So const active ingredient quantity range, get value, and make sure that is an equal sign, and const active ingredient yield range, and then so now what we want to do is we need to determine, for instance, if spinach is in here, we want to edit spinach, but if we choose something that isn't already in here, like hamburger bun, we want to add it based on the quantity and yield. So we're going to need a couple of outside functions for that rather than crowding this function. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a lot of these variables and wrap them in a param. So we want the active menu SKU, ingredient data, menu item, what is it? Menu ingredient data, active ingredient SKU, active ingredient unit, ingredient quantity, and ingredient yield. So we have all those parameters wrapped in an object. And so we want to check if the ingredient exists. So ingredient exists. And we'll do that as a Boolean. I have to create this function. And then we could just do the last one as a ternary. Ingredient exists, edit, existing, menu, ingredient. And the ternary would take, if the ingredient exists, edit an existing one. And if not, add a new one. And this doesn't return anything. We'll just say return true. We don't necessarily need it to do anything, for return anything. So now what we have to do is we have to create get ingredient SKU from name, get ingredient unit from SKU, and ingredient exists in menu item. And then we need edit menu ingredient and add menu ingredient. So we'll create those. We can do it in utilities, or we can do it here. Might as well do it here. Function get ingredient SKU from name. Get ingredient SKU from name. Actually, I'll just take this. Get ingredient SKU from name. And use filter, and if if active ingredient name. So we get the active row. If the active ingredient name, we get the active row. And then from that row, we want the first index. In the ingredient data, it's the first index. Now, this is going to return a 2D array, even though it's just a single array. So we just want that first array and then the first element of the first array. So that's the get ingredient SKU from name. And it's a misspelling there. Get ingredient unit from SKU. So get ingredient unit from SKU. We're going to do a very similar thing. Active row, ingredient data, filter row, and if row move this all up a little bit, return row, and then return active row. And remember, it's a 2D array. We just want the first element, even though it's just one element. But 0, 1, 2, we want that unit. So that's how we get the unit. And what was the next one? The next one is the Boolean. Ingredient exists in menu item. I'm going to change this to data. It doesn't really matter what you name it. I'm just more comfortable with data for the function itself. And so what we want is the existing row. So we're checking if what we're doing is we're checking if we can pull an existing row using a filter. So existing row equal data menu ingredient data filter if row data so now we're doing a double check. Ingredient exists in menu. So we're checking, we have to check for the menu SKU and the ingredient SKU. So if row active menu SKU and row 1 equals data active ingredient SKU, we return row. And then all we have to do is return So ingredient exists in menu item, and that should return a Boolean. I accidentally put this function inside the other one. Okay, so those are the three of the outside utilities that we need. I'm going to test these. Get some space in the bottom. And function test get ingredient. So we're going to test this one first, and that's a function. Didn't skew from name. And let's find lettuce. And let's console log that. And check it. Okay, seems to work for that. Let's move that out to tests. And to test the ingredient, menu ingredient data get menu that's a function. I'll force these in just for this test const. And active menu skew. Active menu skew. And active ingredient. Okay, and then what we will do is we'll do another console log just so we can see the result. Okay, let's see. Test ingredient exists. Active menu skew is not defined, 63. Active Misspelt it there. So active menu SKU 1, and after another misspell there. Okay, why is that giving me a false? Menu ingredient data, get menu ingredients range, get values, active menu SKU, active ingredient SKU, menu ingredient data, active menu SKU, active ingredient SKU, ingredient exists, existing row equals data, existing row equals data, menu ingredient data, filter row. Okay, so and then out of the one, let's try another one. And this should run false. Okay, that works. And so now we still need to run some tests on the get ingredient. Oh no, we got the get ingredient SKU from name. Now we have to create these two other functions, add existing menu ingredient, and if we go back up here, add existing menu ingredient and add menu ingredient. Okay, so first, before I work on these functions, I just want to change that to add new menu ingredient. I notice this parameter is grayed out because it was misspelt. And I want to go down here and move this test out of the way, over to tests. And so we are going to start with edit existing menu ingredient. Just going to change this to data, doesn't really matter, but get this up a bit. So when we edit an existing menu ingredient, we need to find the row, get the row. So we find the row by matching these two, by matching the menu SKU and the ingredient SKU, because there should not be two of the same ingredient SKUs associated with the same menu SKU. So first we got to match those two, and then we want to get this whole row, and then we want to determine what is being edited based on what is in this in these cells. So first, we will be needing to get the index. So I'm going to call this active index, and I'm just going to plug in a -1 because I'm going to get this index from within a filter function. And then this is the row that we're going to pull out of the data. and we're getting the menu ingredient data from the parameters. And on this one, we will get the row and the index. And if here we're going to match both the fields. So if row 0 if row 0 equals the SKU and row 1 equals the equals the active ingredient SKU. If those two conditions are met, we know the active index will equal the index. And we want to return that row to get that matched row. So now that we have the edit row, we're going to check if the quantity or the yield both have any values. So data, I'm going to start with the quantity and does not equal undefined. And just in case, I'll copy this. And we're also checking if it's a blank field. If both of those, the edit row, and remember, even though it's only one row, it's a two-dimensional array, so it's 2 brackets. So we want to just pull out that first bracket and get this edit row equals data ingredient quantity. So we're setting the edit row to that value if both those conditions are met. And let's change this one. I'll do command D to select them. So that's what we need for ingredient yield, but it's going to be 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So that sets it. Now that that is set for both, we want to we still need to put that row into the main data array. So we do that by that's when we use the active index, and it equals edit row, and again that's a double bracket. I guess we could extract that, but we're not in this case. And then const range, so we want to get the range. The get menu items ingredients range, and set values. And so that should set the values. Now, let's get this up a little bit. Okay, so that should work, but I'm going to do a test function again. Test add or test edit existing menu ingredient. And this repeats a lot of stuff, so I'm going to just paste in what I'm going to do. So just to test it, I'm going to get the active SKU, get the active ingredient, get the active menu SKU, the ingredient data, menu data, the active ingredient name, the ingredient SKU, ingredient unit, ingredient quantity, the yield. I'm going to put them all into this parameters, and the parameters are for the edit existing menu ingredients. Okay, so I have this here. Now I want to change the spinach to 0.2 and its yield to 0.95. So this will pick up the values, and let's just test it. Test edit existing menu ingredient. Set property of 2. Okay, so we have an error. So edit that may be the problem there. Let's see if this works. Okay, so that updated that. Let's try it again. 0.35. Change the yield to 0.95 or 0.85. Okay, so that seems to work. So that is, and I'll move this test out of the way. So I moved the test out of the way, and so if we go back to ingredient exists, we need to edit the existing menu ingredient, and next we will do the function add new menu ingredient. Okay, so add new menu ingredient should be pretty straightforward. Actually, I'll just get it from here. Add new menu ingredient. So if this function determines that the ingredient doesn't exist, all we need to do is append a row to the bottom of this menu item ingredients page. And the easiest way to do that is menu item ingredient sheet . I'll just put a return there for readability. So first is the ingredient SKU, which we named active menu SKU. And the second is the active ingredient SKU. The other one is the ingredient quantity. Just double check how this is fed in, how we fit it in up here. Active ingredient quality and ingredient. Oh, we need the unit. ingredient quantity. Active ingredient unit. So we need that unit, and then ingredient yield. So now this should work as long as all our functions are correct. So let's say we have the salad. We look at the ingredients, and let's look for an ingredient that isn't already in there. I'll put in falafel mix, and we'll put in 100 grams and 0.95 yield. Okay, so that did not seem to work. Let's take a look. Okay, so I guess we have to test this update menu item ingredients. So, or actually we don't need to do wrap it in a test because it doesn't take any parameters. So we should be able to just run it from here and see what it says. And that is, this may be the problem right here. Okay, that worked, but as we can see, we didn't get the menu SKU. We didn't get the active SKU and the ingredient SKU. So let's see why that is. There was a spelling error there. Active. Let's delete this. Okay, so there it is. It added the falafel mix. Why does the falafel mix cost so much? That might be just a problem over here. $10.25 per gram. That seems quite expensive. Maybe per kilogram. So I'm just going to change that. And we don't want per kilogram. Let's say 0.1 kilogram. Or we still have to attach the script. So the script we want to attach is to the button, update menu, item ingredients. So I've deleted that. Let's try it again. Okay, so that works. Now, I think that's everything that we needed to do. So let's try to add a new recipe. I just want to copy an image file. And so let's add tacos. We'll go for a 30% margin. Every recipe will have one. It'll take 0.1 minutes, and the price will be $12.99. And so let's just check that this works. So there are the tacos. They got added. There's no ingredients yet. So let's add some I don't think we have taco ingredients yet in here, but we can just go with some ground beef. So it added the ground beef. Now let's say I want to change my margin to 25%. And that seems to work well. If I want to edit the ground beef, increase it to 0.2. That seems to work. Everything updates. So that's about everything we set out to do. This is, to go into production, this would still need a lot of work. We need to do data validation on all these fields, make sure it's getting the like numbers and not strings in this, in the ingredients. We also need the ability to add ingredients and edit them, although this could come from a separate inventory system. Excuse me. And we also need the ability to delete items, and that could be added. I just didn't want this video to go too long. So that's it. Hope you enjoyed it. If you have any comments, leave a comment below. Thank you.